Hello everyone. Today I want to talk just a little bit about how much of a continuous warp you can actually weave. If you're using a shedding device or not, there is a limit to how much of that warp you can actually use. It helps to know this before you set up your tapestry. You don't want to get to the end and find out that you actually don't have enough warp to finish the tapestry in the way you want. This is a Mirex 22-inch loom. It has a 22-inch width and it weaves to 19 inches wide. It's a fairly tall loom. I have it set up here with 30 inches from top of the beam to bottom of the beam. So it's tempting to think that, oh, I could weave a 60-inch piece. Because of course in a continuous warp, you can turn the warp around and weave on the front or the back. As you can sort of see I've done here. There's a layer of free space between the warps here, and up here you can see I've done a sample for a big tapestry, and this is a sample I've just finished for a different large tapestry. It's tempting to think, oh, I have all this space from the top of this loom down to here to weave another thing on here before I cut it off. But I want to talk about what the limits actually are of how much of a warp you can weave. Right now, after weaving everything I've done on here, the warping bar is up here at the very top of the loom. It's right at the back of the loom. I could move it up about 1 more inch and put it at the very top of this bar. Other looms with continuous warps like the Schacht Ross work a little bit differently, but they're similar in terms of a warping bar that moves around the back as you weave and advance the warp. So think about the shedding mechanism first of all. A lot of these continuous warped looms like the Mirex and the Schacht Ross have a rotating shuttle bar. The Hagen is another loom that has this kind of rotating shedding bar. So basically there's a bar that heddles are attached to. You turn it one way and it pulls one shed forward. You turn it the other way and it turns the other shed forward. That has some physics limitations in that you really need to have enough warp that you can allow that slack to happen. So think about this row of heddles is pulling forward half of the warp. If the free warp that I have is super short, I'm going to have to deflect that warp even more and pull really hard. That can be hard to impossible to do if that distance gets shorter and shorter. So when I turn this, I want to be able to turn it easily as I'm weaving. I don't want to have to struggle, and I also don't want to bend my equipment. So these little bars that the heddles attach to could easily bend if you are putting too much stress on your loom. So I recommend you need at least 12 inches of free warp at the end of your piece, which is, about this much. That's the minimum that you need for easy weaving. So it's tempting for me to think, here I have, 20 inches left. It seems like, oh, I could weave a whole nother piece there, but I really can't if I want to use the shedding device. The other thing you obviously have to consider is your finishing technique. So here, of course, I'm going to do a flipped under hem, but I want to use a half Damascus knot on the end of this sample. So I need at least 2 inches of warp to tie those knots. I prefer to have 3 to 4 inches if possible. With the way I weave, I always have that much extra warp, but if you like to, push it to the very last bit, make sure that you leave enough to do whatever finishing technique you're going to do, whether it's fringe or a hem or some other kind of finishing that you like for your tapestries. So as you're setting up for a new piece, hopefully you know about how long you want the piece to be, and then think about adding that waist for so that you can tie the knots, and making sure that at the end of the piece you have at least 12 inches of room if you want to continue to use the shedding bar. Of course, if I really wanted to push it, I could take the shedding bar off at this moment, leave 4 inches between pieces, do a new header, and then I would have about, if I left 4 inches here and then started a new piece, I would have approximately 16 inches that I could still weave if I took the shedding bar off and rotated the warping bar, which is currently at the top of the loom, all the way to the front. That also means I'm going to have to take off this top spring, which means that, you know, I'm relying on how I warped it initially to keep that warp spacing even. So in general, I know that we like to not waste warp, but as weavers, we should know that wasting warp is something that happens with any form of weaving. There is always loom waste and waste to that warp that just is inevitable in terms of being able to weave easily. So think about ways you can use those pieces of warp if you want to use them to tie up your Christmas chicken, or I don't know. Please don't put them out for the birds. Warp is bad for birds. It's not a good idea. And I don't know that this kind of warp actually composts. If you have wool warp, you can probably just throw it in your compost pile and it will feed your soil. So hopefully that's a helpful look at how long your loom needs to be when you're planning your piece.